qué miedo, tío. Me cago en tal. ¿Cómo se nos ocurre hacer un episodio en inglés, tío?
Why not? This is BIMrras, the podcast about BIM and technology applied to construction. The podcast that even Chuck Norris doesn't dare to listen to. Welcome to BIMrras Podcast, the place where we chat about BIM methodology and technology in the construction sector. Y no te has equivocado, ¿no? Esto sigue siendo BIMrras y seguimos tratando de que Chuck Norris escuche alguno de nuestros episodios, pero este no es el motivo para torturarte con mi inglés gallego, ni siquiera se debe esto a que estemos probando una IA para que haga BIMrras en inglés, que te aseguro que lo hemos barajado. El motivo de haber hecho el saludo en inglés es para ponerte en guardia. Esta será nuestra primera entrevista en inglés, bueno, la primera entrevista en la que entrevistaremos a alguien. Ya nos ha entrevistado Petru en alguna ocasión. La primera entrevista que haremos en inglés, y ello pese a que nuestro invitado de hoy se desenvuelve con soltura en 6 idiomas, no sé si 7, entre los que el español está, por supuesto. El inglés es el idioma del código, como lo es en muchísimos aspectos del BIM, o como lo es en muchos otros campos, así que nos hemos animado a desempolvar nuestro inglés nivel medio y vamos allá.
Desempolvar, dice.
Desempolvar, efectivamente.
Desempolvar.
Taking out the dust, whatever. I said that today I'm very, very excited to dive into the world of ASC technology with someone who has been and is behind some of the most popular CAD and BIM tools since a lot of years. Jeremy Tammik, also known as the building coder, is consulting analyst at Autodesk, has been a cornerstone of the company since 1988, and his journey began as technology evangelist, spreading the gospel of AutoCAD development across continents. After a stint away working on HVAC application, Jeremy returned to Autodesk in 2005, and ever since, he's been deeply embedded in the Autodesk Developer Network, specializing in the Revit API. So yes, Jeremy is the man you blame on when something doesn't work in your plugin or when you don't understand why in the hell there's no way to do whatever in an easier way when struggling with the Revit API. Jeremy has an amazing, very, very amazing academic background in mathematics and physics. He has worked as a teacher, translator, C++ programmer, pioneering the graphic user interface and multitasking projects. Well, as I said before, fluent in 6 languages. He's a cultural savant who also enjoys playing the flute, reading, traveling, and engaging in theater improvisation, but he also is a yogi, carpenter, and used to enjoy climbing cliffs or navigating oceans. All those things while maintaining a family life with 4 children and involvement in community-focused projects. I just can say, what have I been doing my entire life, Jeremy? Welcome to BIMrras.
Hello, thank you very much. That's nice to hear. I'm impressed.
Well, I am
Recognize
impressed.
myself.
And I even didn't say the yoga part, your meditation skills, your commitment with music, and a lot of things that are in your resume or around the internet, which makes me ask if are you the same guy or there are a lot of Jeremy Tammiks all around the world doing things related with construction sector, because it's amazing what you've done and what you are doing.
It's all a question of marketing.
Well, then congratulate your marketing team because it's quite amazing. And please let me introduce my partners today, just my partner. Before continuing, because I must say hello to Rogelio, who is helping me to destroy Shakespeare languages.
You don't need any help from my. You don't need any help from my part of.
Well, as usual.
Sure. You don't know what you've been doing with your life, but we do. We do.
Well, by the way, Rogelio, how are you doing?
Fine.
Are you
Pretty
very
nervous
afraid,
because
scary,
I'm afraid
or
scary to death. Yeah.
well, going to the point directly, because being not my mother tongue, perhaps in English is more difficult, at least for me, making introductions or quite ample the speeches in advance. So let's go straight and starting with your background. You've been with Autodesk since 1988. Most of our listeners, well, they were just a dream in their parents' head, or even nor a dream. But this means that you've been there since AutoCAD 10. I've been checking, and that means a lot for many of us, because it's time to ask something I've been asking myself a lot of years. Come on, guy, what's wrong with our hedges boundaries? For real.
Yeah, we all want to know. Yeah.
I think I
That
asked
happened
myself
there.
this question, I don't know, millions of times. But
Yeah.
Wow.
many people are aware that of your maths and physics background, but it is just a tiny piece of your story. I'm not talking about your philosophy or martial art interests, but it makes me wonder, what was the way from your early studies in humanities to be a computer guy?
Aha. I actually never studied humanities. Just studied math and physics.
But you
And
started in humanities in high school?
yes, high school. I went to an old-fashioned German high school called Gymnasium in Stockholm, in Sweden. So I grew
Yes,
up in Sweden and
I,
went to
I read it.
German.
Yeah, that's why
And
I asked.
the nice thing about this school was that it was sort of traditional, focused on humanities. So there was more stress on languages and philosophy and culture. And I was very happy about that. And another thing that I was happy about was that it's a German foreign school. So Germany subsidizes these schools all over across the planet in various places. And for the teachers, they come from Germany for a limited time, like 4 years or something. And it's quite a privilege to go there. They get economic advantages. They are selected. So we had very good teachers. And another aspect was that for people staying in Sweden, it was quite attractive to leave the school for the finishing years and go to a Swedish school instead to finish off because they could save 1 year's schooling. This gymnasium system had 13 years of schooling in total until you reach the baccalaureate, the
Okay.
Abitur in German. And in the Swedish system, you had 11 or 12 years, depending on what kind of, or 13 for the really hardcore technical branches. But then you would be specializing in technical stuff or in simpler stuff. Very nice system in Sweden. I like it. All the kids are together until the end of the ninth year.
Hmm.
And then they can choose to
That's
specialize
nice.
in
That's
any kind
nice.
of direction. And even if you want to become a carpenter or a mechanic or something, you still stay in the same system. So you have a certain amount of schooling and a certain amount of practice. And the
Very
people
interesting.
aiming for more academic directions, they have more years and no practice, more academic stuff. Anyway, so lots of people left my school and our class shrunk and shrunk and shrunk. And we were actually at the time the largest finishing class in the history of the school with 10 pupils. And
10.
class before us had 4 pupils for
Oh,
1 year, and the class after us had 6. So it was quite special and very high quality, a very pleasant
you bet it.
going to school.
Do you think, because here in Spain we have some kind of a big debate about humanities in high school, and our programming about how the education system must be. And do you think that background in humanities added up to your formation, to your studies in maths and physics? Do you
Yes,
find it useful?
Yes, very, very useful. Absolutely. I do think it's a shame that schools tend to scare young people away from mathematics and physics and rational thinking and logical thinking. That's really a big fault in the part of most of our didactical systems, I think. But at the same time, humanities take a much more time to shape and
Yeah,
to
I
grow
agree.
than the pure
And that is
technical things.
this is something that you really find the taste for it in when you're mature and you grow up, and it's
Yes,
I,
and the
I don't,
foundation is laid in the schools, of
yeah,
course.
yeah,
I'm a great fan of early schooling or early caring for children. There's a study from 1962, proving that it is economically sensible to invest in schooling or caring for young children. They took 192 people in a ghetto in New York, children, and half of them got caring in the afternoon, and the other half didn't. In 1962. And they followed these children since then. How long is that? That's 38 plus 24, over 50 years. So they could see what effect did $1 of caring per afternoon for one child have in its life, in employment, health, criminality, everything. And it pays off hundreds of times over. And the prizes for this study were not given to the social workers or teachers who explored this concept, but to a professor of economics. He got a Nobel Prize for economics for proving the return of investment on this initial childhood investment.
for
And
proving something that
and still all politicians ignore it up until today. They say, no, we need more money for police. We need more
this
money
is
for prisons.
no, you don't.
And no, less money for schools, less money for kindergarten, less
this
money
is
for children. That's crazy. That's criminal.
the endless confusion between spending and investment.
Yes, yes, yes. Yes, you can, and there again, there you come back to rationality. We would need a rational look at investment and spending, and we would need rational politicians, and we would need rational voters.
Yeah, and the problem is that the
I'm
politician
not so
needs
sure
to.
that's a very easy goal to achieve, but perhaps it starts with, you know, the previous part, the investment on schooling.
Yes.
So it's like going again and again on the same mistakes. I don't know if nerd or geek is offensive in English. I really don't know. I mean, I use it in
Yeah.
Spanish as well.
Yeah.
Depends on the context as something good, but I don't know if in English is something bad. But I'm pretty sure that there's something which what happens between being a humanities student in baccalaureate, it's to start maths and physics studies in university. How is
Yeah.
the way to do that?
I would definitely identify very strongly with geek and nerd, and I always was one, I'm afraid. And I think that most people who decide to study mathematics are nerds and geeks in a way, because, at least from my point of view, mathematics is a way to deal with an area with some certainty. You
Is
know,
the way to understand our world?
no, definitely not. The world is much more complicated. Mathematics is no way as complicated as the
Then
world.
the way to avoid it.
And even more complicated than just the world are human beings
Yes,
and emotions and cultures.
I can say yes, they are.
Yes, so I think many people who go to study mathematics are sort of seeking something simpler than the normal the human world, and even simpler than the humanities. Yeah.
Well, as I said before, I researched your resume and your entire well, all which is published in internet about you, or at least many of the web pages that says something about you, and many of them has been written by you, by the way. And everybody can read that you're fluent in six languages, which we really appreciate. Um, and not only speak six languages, but you're an avid reader too. And that's only the peak. And what is in my head is, how do these skills, I mean, being a carpenter, being a musician, being a climber even, how all those skills influence your technical work?
Well, I
Where are
keep
they when you
work.
are working?
My work is mostly pretty separate from my private life and other activities. So there's the influence is just, I'm interested in everything. I'm interested in solving problems. And that's one common factor between all of these activities.
I bet when you're climbing, perhaps solving a problem could be the difference between a good end or what not so good end.
It can.
Well, perhaps most of us and most of our audience has a story to tell about how they ended in BIM and BIM, or how they discovered a more productive way to work using BIM tools. I must say using your BIM tools, because we all assume that Revit is on everywhere and is being the king of the market. Uh, but your background is anything but the usual. I mean, you're a mathematician working in the ISC, an ISC related company. And how was it even linked? I mean, perhaps there was no construction workers to solve problems or to programming tools. I bet there weren't when you started.
Yeah, well, Autodesk has always had a focus on these different domains and tried to address all of them. So the mechanical, the architectural, the generic drawing and modeling, and in the last decades, also the creating worlds in general. And when I started working for Autodesk, I was actually employed to do developer support in Europe when we didn't yet have any developers, because John Walker had only just integrated Lisp into AutoCAD. That was the first real sort of hardcore customization possibility within AutoCAD. Before that, there had been some very minute possibilities, but Lisp really revolutionized the way that AutoCAD worked and was used, and even the way that Autodesk looked at AutoCAD and the developer community as an area where unimaginable things could be done and the tools could be used in ways that nobody had thought possible before. And that was
Actually,
really thanks to John Walker.
I'm one of the first on claiming that one of the smartest things on Revit is the API. I've
Yes.
said many times that it's very, very clever to launch an, let's say, incomplete product that can be finished or adapted by the owners. Well, owners, their users. And I think it's fair to say that you came from AutoCAD where a lot of people have, as you said, learn functional programming, even if they didn't know Lisp was functional programming, by the way. But how was born the idea of opening in so open way the app to be completed by the users? I mean, when somebody realizes that perhaps the best way to make our tool Revit more and more popular is not to make tools for everybody, but opening it.
Are you saying that the best thing to do it was not doing anything at all?
Well, they did the best thing, which is open your doors and let people to interact with your tool.
Yes,
How
basically that's what Autodesk proclaims today, being a platform company, this platform idea. And the idea of a platform grew step by step. And that was also all due to John Walker and back in the last millennium, because he implemented AutoLisp for his own purposes. He wanted to do things in AutoCAD that were difficult to do manually. So he wanted to do it programmatically, and for that he needed a programming language. And then when AutoLisp was available and successful, the software landscape started to change, and more packages, components became available with powerful functionality inside of libraries. So, and also AutoLisp showed that it was powerful for interaction and manipulation, but for performance critical tasks, it was not sufficient. So, the next package or functionality that John Walker became interested in was a software package called AutoSolid. That's a CSG, constructive solid geometry modeler. So you could do solid modeling in this program, and it had a C interface. So after Lisp, John wanted a C interface in AutoCAD, because with a C interface, he could hook up the source code for AutoSolid with the source code for AutoCAD. So he went and implemented ADS, the AutoCAD development system, which is just a C wrapper around AutoLisp. And then he packaged AutoSolid into AutoCAD, and suddenly we had 3D AutoCAD with real solid modeling capabilities. And quite soon afterwards, object-oriented programming became a big topic for large software projects. It was clear that the complexity of a large software project cannot be managed at all without compartmentalizing things, separating them clearly. This is one piece, this is another piece, this is a third piece, and the interfaces are clearly defined. So people started thinking about converting AutoCAD to an object-oriented environment. And that happened with another pretty genius programmer, Bill Atkinson, who got the task of making AutoCAD object-oriented. He initially wanted to do it in Smalltalk.
Smalltalk.
Smalltalk, yes. Very pure object orientation.
Amazing.
But it seemed a bit too complicated or challenging, and
I
they ended
guess.
up choosing C++ instead and implementing the AutoCAD runtime extension, ARX, which later became Object ARX. And then with ARX, AutoCAD was just a kernel, a very small kernel, and everything else was plugged into this kernel. And that meant you could take other things that were not originally planned and add them as well. So AutoCAD suddenly became this huge, unlimited programming platform. And in Revit, the situation was completely different because there was recently a blog post on the history of Revit. I don't know all the details, but it was originally written completely without a programming interface and also without any programming interface in mind. And when Autodesk acquired Revit in, I don't know what, 2005 or something, Autodesk said, we are a platform company. We understand the importance of end users and developers being able to adapt the product and adding new functionality. And the Revit team said, never, never, no, absolutely not. That is not the idea of Revit. And there was a fight about that, a struggle.
There's no way to success with that orientation.
Anyway, so Autodesk, as the owner of the product, got to do as it wanted, and an API was added.
And you started to release the API as in each release of Revit more and more open. Is that because it was not so API focused? I mean, because what you said was not designed to be so open or not to be a platform itself, which is nowadays.
Yes. Well, it's still sort of halfway between platform and user interface. Originally, the Revit API was a COM API, so based on the Windows COM interface, and that was a bit shaky. And quite early on, 2009, 2010, it switched to the .NET API, which was more stable. But as you say, Revit itself, its kernel is not designed to be an API-driven kernel or a platform for programming. So it is still internally more focused on the user interface, but the developers have set it up so that every single piece of user interface functionality comes equipped with a script.
Okay.
An internal Revit development language script. So every button, every command, every option is somehow linked to this scripting language. And if you click a certain button, then this scripting language will produce the .NET API for it. So nowadays, the requirement from the program managers of Revit is if you write a piece of functionality, you write the user interface, and you must enable this script so that the API is automatically also produced. And that's why the coverage is broader and broader. And for quite a number of years, there were old pieces of Revit that were not equipped with this API scripting, and all of the new pieces were always equipped with scripting, and therefore the coverage would grow and grow and grow.
And then the migration, the recent migration. I mean, it's well known that the Revit API was based on .NET 4.8 framework, but you've done I think a huge jump in Revit 2025, changing from .NET 4.8 to .NET Core 8. This is I mean, a significant upgrade, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Yes. The
And why
reason
now?
it was actually overdue. Many developers have been asking for an upgrade to a more modern .NET platform.
Really?
several years now. Yes, absolutely. At least 4 or 5 years, people have said, I'm using new .NET functionality. Why are you not? And the reason is simply that Revit is making use of a number of additional components again, and the dependencies of all of these components needs to be considered. And that makes every kind of significant migration very, very complex to manage. And that's the reason why it was postponed for a long time. And there was even doubt about whether it would be possible in this release. And also, Autodesk has tried to unify the platform components. So there are a number of components used in the desktop products that are reused both in AutoCAD, Inventor, Revit, in several different environments. So all of these products had to agree and synchronize and decide we will take this big step to move to the new generation of .NET. And I think during the last year or so, it was still quite a long time unclear what version of the .NET core will be targeted. They started by moving to 6 or 7, and then towards the end, they found out, oh yes, okay, we can manage and we will move all the way to 8 right away.
Or perhaps those developers who were claiming for the migration are the half, and the other half is those who are claiming why the migration has to change all my environment and makes me to rewrite all my plugins and whatever.
That's what I was going to ask. I mean, is it necessary? What are the benefits of changing from .NET 4.8 to .NET Core 8? I mean, there's
I'm not an expert on .NET or the functionality, but I can just say that .NET 4.8 was so old and out of date and not being enhanced. At a certain point, after a couple of years of age in software, with security vulnerabilities and new functionality coming up, things just become so old that it's very hard to maintain them.
I think, I don't know if I'm wrong, but I think .NET, which one? The .NET Core 8 is able to be used on web applications. Is it? So is there any chance to have this, or let's say, is there anything this related to this step, this huge step, is linked on somehow with probable Revit web application?
I'm pretty sure it's not. You have to see that Revit is a C++ application.
I know.
And this .NET API interface has
Allows you
nothing to do
to
with
use
the Revit core.
the web interface.
Yeah.
So perhaps a hybrid application, which means half of the application runs on your servers and the other half runs on my web browser.
Ah, yeah. I think some parts of Revit run that way already, don't they? And I guess that those parts will grow slowly, step by step. But the main core of Revit is still C++ desktop local installation.
I don't know if web, how is the technology? Oh, I think there's a way to convert some C++ application into web apps, which is, well, I don't mind. I can't remember the name. But perhaps I've just been dreaming about this unicorn called Revit Web.
Yeah.
You and many more.
I lost my script, and here it is. Okay,
So,
just to name some of the enhancements or improvements that you released this in this version. I think, because I'm not an expert on Revit, that the Revit 2025 API has introduced some additions in the electrical and MEP sectors that perhaps are being more important than the other sectors. Is right that?
I really don't know. I'm not at all an expert on Revit user interface or Revit functionality. So I don't keep up
Oh, I
to.
mean in the API.
Yes, no,
Because
haven't looked at that in detail, so I can't even say.
perfect then.
Let me bring something a bit different. I mean, because, well, I'm not a Revit user. I'm an ArchiCAD all-time user from a long, long time ago, some geologic era behind. And I know, well, I've seen how the authoring software has evolved since its initial versions. I was very curious when Revit was launched and have followed the software since, because I already started learning Revit when it wasn't part of Autodesk. And I'm kind of a bit worried about how and where the authoring software is heading its course. We were some very we thought some time ago that we could make a whole project, a whole digital twin in our authoring software in the beginning of this process 20 years ago or 30 years ago. But now what we can see in the last decade is that this process probably kind of stalled. The development stopped in some of the functionalities about modeling that we would like to get in the authoring software, and there we go. We thought that maybe some movements about how to change the license model and to get into the subscription model will make it easier for the authoring software companies to develop and procure these new functionalities that we need. But probably that isn't the way it's going now. And on top of this, we have all the legacy code that it's impeding Revit or ArchiCAD to improve, because that is a heavy weight to be lifted by the programming core of both companies. So what is your point of view about this? I mean, are we going to finally get the software that can make organic shapes or produce a perfect digital twin of our project, or that's not the perspective or the point, the destination point that the companies want to get there?
I think the companies are all continuously searching for optimal solutions, most efficient workflows, and discovering new targets to optimize how a building is created. And there are many, many factors that influence that.
Yeah.
And I'm the authoring software as a tool is just one out of many. A number of other tools are the communication, the collaboration, how to share this information, how to ensure that the information goes all the way through to the building site, the maintenance of the building, and all of that. And with all of the focus on collaboration and communication, I do think that the cloud-based solutions can address many of those tasks. And this target keeps shifting as well. So it's clear that we have to keep up with the old functionality that is already available and that people rely on, and at the same time integrate it with new solutions that address the most urgent tasks.
But do you think that
Very much like marketing, though.
but do you think that the target has shifted from the modeling process to the collaboration world and because what we see in the modeling part is that the advances are fractional, very little in that field is improved, or even sometimes the new tools fight along the ancient tools, because
Yes.
these old tools rely on legacy code and the new are implemented differently.
Yeah, well, I think it's very, very important to continuously look at what is the task at hand, how can I address that most efficiently, and at a certain point, when you say there's a struggle between the new and the old or different approaches, I would definitely I think the most important thing in software is to not struggle. Avoid all conflict. If you have a problem and you have two components involved in that problem, throw them away, both of them, right away, and search for a new one, because there is no single programming task on the planet that has not been solved already. And many of them have been solved 100 times or 1,000 times. And a lot of these solutions are available in open source. So grab the best solution you can find, research the problem, understand the tools that you already have in depth. That's already a big task. I don't understand Revit in depth, and I don't think many people do.
I totally agree with your approach.
If it doesn't do exactly what you want with a minimum of fuss and without any conflict with others, throw it away and do something else, because the solutions are ready to be picked and connected. And that's a total change in the way that people program today. You have all these components out there, and the best solution is the most efficient connection of existing components.
Perhaps
the hive, the hive is smarter than the bee, or something like that. The hive is smarter than the bee.
Perhaps, Rogelio, you are afraid of letting AutoCAD go and trying new solutions.
No, I mean, that is not going to happen. Jeremy, I love my AutoCAD a lot.
I think you already know who is more focused on modeling part and who is on the information part in this in this group. But talking about collaboration, well, I didn't said before that you are part of the Forge developer support or something like that. I mean, and you said something about the cloud and how the collaboration, the cloud applications and everything is going on. And when you talk about collaboration, I thought about community, because collaboration means not only collaborate on the same project, but collaborate on the any other people projects. And we here in BIMrras strongly believe that in what community can build, that's what why we built BIMrras Insider actually. And you are known not only for being a rock star in the developer community, but also for blogging about Forge, BIM, and the Revit API. I mean, there's like an official Jeremy Tammik speaking on the developer community, but again, there's something like a side project, perhaps, on the blogging about all those things. What motivates you to share your knowledge so actively? Because I mean, I've seen your posts many times linked as a solution for something, or just read what Tammik says about this or this, and why these two projects, or why? What motivates you to share the knowledge on this way?
Yeah. It's again the same motivation that I mentioned at the beginning. I love solving problems, and I have a lot more fun solving a programming problem. I enjoy programming tremendously, but there's a bigger problem around, and my job is to support the developer community. And to do that is more about communication. And I did some programming to address very specific tasks to prove that it is possible to achieve something. But the longer, the more I've been more of a librarian and just collecting information and publishing it, editing it, perfecting it, making it easy to read and clear to understand. And it seems to me that is
Something
more,
like a code curator.
yes, a curator, exactly, a librarian or curator. And it seems to me that's just the most efficient way of ensuring that the major part of the community moves forward and can be effective. So in a way, it's another way of problem solving as well. My communication and collaboration is an efficient way for problem solving, and that is
Very,
passion.
I mean,
Thank you.
I read a lot of times in many different forums or groups or whatever, things like your problem is already solved. Just read this post from Jeremy Tammik, and everything is coded already, so you don't have to invent the wheel again and again.
Yes, and most of that is not my programming, but the solutions from the community shared in the discussion forum. And in that forum also there are quite a number of people who know a lot more about both Revit and programming than me. I know almost nothing about Revit. I understand programming, but these guys, many of them know more about both. And
Yes,
that's
I know.
really effective.
And well, that's what they call collective knowledge.
Yes.
Is, I mean, the best way to know about anything. So, Rogelio.
Sí, yeah.
So,
Talking about collective thinking, you know, I'm always amazed how we have so much difficulties to build an AC software, an open source AC software. We have, you know, our landscape here in Spain and Europe is a lot of extremely small companies. And you know, some time ago we made an inquiry and for something like 500 professionals, and we found that almost 98% were working in companies of 5 or less people. And they do everything: the architecture, the structural analysis, the MEP analysis and design, whatever, you name it. And for those companies, the license cost for all of that software that is needed is a heavy burden. So many of them are looking at the community and asking, why don't we have some AC open source software, like, for example, photographers or designers or you know, 3D artists have developed throughout these years. And why do you think it's so difficult to produce to achieve this kind of arrangement between the community to work together and try to get something
Yes,
that would be very
always
delightful?
been very interested in this aspect. And actually, back in my Autolisp and AutoCAD days, a group of maybe 50 or 100 developers we collected in Central Europe and formed a community called AGE, AutoCAD Developers Group Europe. And we organized our own conferences and shared a lot of information because of the lack of information on internet at the time. It didn't really exist in the way we see it today. And also, yeah, developer support from Autodesk was limited. Basically, in the beginning, I was alone in Europe. So developers helped themselves and shared information, and that was effective. And also today, I would say there are very large, very functional and powerful open source AEC solutions being worked on. I believe one important one is Speckle. Don't know whether
Actually,
you've
it's amazing.
Speckle. Yeah.
Speckle, yeah, we know.
Yeah. But I do think the issue is also to do with liability, trust, guarantees, big companies, marketing. It's a little bit like the Windows desktop platform, which is in many ways inferior to something open source like Linux or Unix in general. And still, the big companies all over the world spend millions and billions buying Windows operating systems
And Linux servers.
instead of using the free open source and more trustworthy solutions that are available, and that they could even look at the code, guarantee that they're not being spied on by Chinese or NSA or Russians or whoever, but still they prefer to pay and have a guarantee that if something goes wrong, we have our developer support and so on. And it's an aversion to risk, really. I would say the whole
Aversion to risk.
culture and community in the last 50 years has been moving away from risk and fun and towards guarantees, liability, risk aversion, and that's
And boring things.
Yeah, but if you think about the intellectual property and the security of our production, which is, and sometimes it is a crucial point. It's I don't know. It's something that it's very strange, the behavior of the AC sector, because that's the last thing we're thinking on. I mean, we're always about the productivity and everything else, but not about what am I going to do with my information the day that maybe Revit or AutoCAD doesn't exist anymore.
yes.
We have reduced a lot of critical information and our intellectual property in platforms that we don't know if they are going to be there forever.
Yes. All of my work, everything I've ever done is in text files. ASCII.
You can.
I moved from Windows to Mac like 10 or 15 years ago, and all of my daily tools were Windows batch files and Python scripts. So I moved them to Unix shell scripts and Python scripts, and I was moved from Windows to Mac in a couple of hours, and I can move back again anytime. And I have simply boycotted proprietary file formats all my life.
We cannot afford that luxury. So
You can.
We can.
Even back in the 1980s, I was a big missionary of do not encode your information into a DWG format. Put it into a text file and write a small add-in that reads your text file and generates the DWG. Same thing for a BIM. The BIM
But
is
that's not a skill that everybody in our sector has. So
no, but it's
perhaps
some developers do this and fare very well with it.
I know, but when it comes to server, for instance, everybody relies on Linux. Almost everybody relies on Linux, but I have to admit that when it comes to desktop, even if they are using Linux, they prefer paid Linux options. I mean, Red Hat is well known between corporates, among corporates, because they provide Linux desktops, but they also provide the security, liability of a big company, which is, I think, the most important factor on the choosing between open source and proprietary platforms from the companies. But Rogelio, there's a huge amount
I
of
know.
open
I was
source tools
I was
that
making
are
some.
not authoring tools itself, which means that perhaps it's not trying to achieve an authoring tool, but trying to get the most of each tool you have.
My question was about authoring tools, and that's probably the most difficult software to be produced. So but we've seen more difficult software being produced by the community. For example, the structural analysis core engines that now uses SIPE, for example. But we don't see that kind of achievement in the AC industry. That was the meaning of the question.
I don't know. Even Revit or Autodesk software have a lot of
probably
open source libraries, tools included on their software. So perhaps it's not a matter of how getting an authoring tool, but how getting a good environment for your tools. Leaving this out of the discussion, what's next? What's next? I mean, you've witnessed almost the entire history of the AC software. Being a developer, of course, into the construction sector, and being part of Autodesk, which is, let's say, the first AC software company. And related to this, I've been hearing and listening more and more how a BIM manager, let's say a BIM expert, must know about programming. I'm very fond of having coding knowledge, but I'm pretty sure that, about this. To be a BIM manager has nothing to do with being a developer. However, I believe that sector knowledge of programming, logic, algorithms, whatever, can be or should be tremendously useful in any technical environment. First thing, do you agree? Any advice? Something to say to these professional or students who might be listening and considering focusing their career in coding?
I totally agree. It's really important to know what you can do, what possibilities you have, and understand when to make use of them and when not, and how far to go in each direction.
And what about not being able to code anything? I mean, not being a coder, but being able to think like a coder.
Yes. Well, actually, we're getting very close to the point where certain areas of thinking are no longer required. And a certain amount of experience can be had for the cost of asking. So I'm very excited about the developments in AI and question answering systems and coding solutions provided, or AI supported coding solutions. So the whole coding industry has changed tremendously since the introduction of ChatGPT. And just as an example, I think the number of questions on Stack Overflow reduced by 50%. 50.
Whoa.
And Stack Overflow has changed and adapted its entire business model, thought concept, foundations to make use of AI and to handle the changes that come by through the use of AI. I think I'm not a programmer now myself today because of the coding and developer support and blogging and so on. But as far as I know, hardly any professional programmer today does not use code project.
I must admit that I prefer going first to ChatGPT than Stack Overflow, because you can discuss the solutions and the options with it.
And in most programming environments today, you have a coding assistant built in.
Yes, the Copilot is there.
Copilot, yeah. So, and that does a lot of work for you, and that work is growing very fast, and
Yeah.
I don't know how far it'll grow. You know, where is the end? We live in very exciting times, and
From another
they're
point of
full
view,
of
perhaps
possibilities, also
uh,
danger.
what
Yeah.
what it worries me is that perhaps from another point of view, we are feeding ChatGPT and all those artificial intelligence with code made of
Artificial
this
intelligence.
artificial, which is
Yes.
like, I don't know if there's something innovative on there, because
Yeah.
it's always like having what a feedback is. I mean, a really feedback, because it's feeding itself by
Yes.
the code that it produces.
Yeah. Well, there are other examples as well, actually. If you took interest in AlphaGo, that was
AlphaGo. Yeah,
the
we know.
Go game
Mm.
solver that first became better at Go than a human being. And it immediately, in its first competition, it was introducing new moves that had not ever been discovered or tested by a human being
I read about that and
in
was
3,000 years of
shocking.
Go history.
And
And
nowadays,
it said, this is crazy. This is
Makes you think
stupid.
about
It's
Skynet.
an error, but it wasn't an error.
It wasn't.
There
yeah,
It
none.
was
and the machine learned the rules on its own. I mean, there was
Yes,
no pre-programming about how
no
to play,
literature.
and every single professional chess player today trains and learns from Alpha Chess.
Yeah.
So,
And also,
so
I read an article about a guy who asked ChatGPT to make a game for him, and he said, I like Sudoku, but I'd like something different. And ChatGPT invented an inverse Sudoku game for him. It was completely new, and he put it online, and within a week, he had 50,000
oh,
subscribers to his new game. I forget the name of it, but it's on the blog somewhere. I put almost
just
everything
say
that I don't want to
and
say
forget on the blog.
what to time to be alive.
It's very exciting, yes.
It,
Dangerous and exciting. Maybe who knows how long, how many human generations
uh,
there will still be to stay
now,
alive.
now, now we
well,
are
let's wait for me, and perhaps next one
in
is going
the
to.
in the last Retaliators chess championship. The ones who going to play against the world champion. What we had is a rating from how close the chess player, the human chess player, was against the perfect moves of the machine. So,
Wow.
and we were between 95% to 98% uh, the more close we get to the perfection of the machine. So
Oh,
now we are measuring ourselves against the perfection of the machine.
Wow.
as amazing as Scarier.
Scary,
Well,
scary.
just to as we wrap up our conversation today, we're curious. I think, I mean, it's something we do in each episode. We are curious about the tools
Are
and
you going to skip the
resources.
last questions about?
Yes, these
Yeah.
are.
Okay.
I lost the last question.
Yeah, about what was his view of the new technologies and trends.
Well, I was to ask about the trends and new technologies, but the answer was done, because
Uh,
artificial intelligence is the topic. And
not virtual reality.
I'm not into that myself. I haven't. I've
And
read a lot about what's happening in the AI world, but not so much about virtual reality.
can you
I
see
guess
it as
for me, the
a
thing
game
that
changer or something?
I'm Well, I don't know. I think the game changer that will come is robotics. I mean, now we have the AI that goes around and answers our questions, but we also need someone who builds houses, washes our clothes, does the dishes, and cooks five-star menus.
Was was
That's
reading I was
robotics.
reading yesterday that the butcher robots are pretty much better now than the human butcher. So,
What
so
robots?
the butcher, the
Butcher. Ah,
yeah,
wow.
yeah,
Oh,
the
cool.
butcher are now are better and yeah, and more
Yeah.
efficient and more perfect than the human butcher. So
Yeah.
so
Perhaps
so
we are
there's nowhere
watching
to
how
hide.
No.
we are watching how the artificial intelligence can replace us at many tasks, and perhaps the next frontier is robots replacing the physical tasks, which
Yeah.
is, I think, well, harder than the other ones. But again, I'm trying to close the interview with this habit we have, which is knowing about your tools and your resources and what inspire and support your work. So just to make your insight not only helpful for us, but for our listeners and I don't know, perhaps taking some good resources to explore. So we have always two questions. One about your information resources. So what are your main sources of informations? What resources you use or regularly rely on? You already said that you read a lot. And which tools or which essential tool do you think is indispensable for your daily routine? I mean,
Yes. Okay. Well, I
your
use the command line. You
command
use
line.
the command line, shell scripts, Python scripts, programmer's text editor.
Actually, I
Eh,
always recommend this pamphlet because it's not even a book. And in the beginning was the command line
yeah, yeah, yeah.
because it's
One thing that I do regret is that I did not learn Emacs or Vim.
oh it's
I wanted to several times, and I wish I had done it, 40 years ago.
I just tried and I regret in the same minute I start. So uh, perhaps it's like latex.
LaTeX is a printing
Yes, for printing.
formatting tool, yeah, but
It's
Emacs is an editor, just a text editor, but it's fully integrated into everything that is digital.
I find it too hard to I don't know if say waste my time or invest my
The
time on that.
contrary, you'd have 10 times more time. If,
Yes,
but it's an investment to get started, yes.
I'm not so sure about that kind of investment. I mean, it's like
Uh,
very, very long-term investment. So perhaps it's more useful some small pills of any other thing.
Okay.
What about your information sources?
Yeah, actually, that's pretty simple. My information comes from the screen that I'm looking at now. And I do read newspapers now and then, but I love reading newspapers. But when I've read them for 2 or 3 days and nothing changes, it's the
No,
same
and
thing every
it's
day.
becomes
I very
sadder,
quickly
sadder.
stop again. And yeah, all my work is public on internet with a discussion forum, the blogging. And my sources are basically the same. I get a lot of information from the Revit API discussion forum. And obviously, I have meetings with my colleagues. and I have internal Autodesk channels. We use Slack internally to communicate. Slack. And there's hundreds of different channels. So some are APS related, cloud stuff, and Revit related, but also AI related. For instance, the AI one is one that I follow quite closely.
I bet. Well, folks, that's all. And this is the end of today's show. My goal was to keep everyone awake and engaged, and I hope we've managed just that. To wrap everything up, it's clear that building involves code more and more, which means that APIs, frameworks, programming languages, and all that stuff has found its way to our computers, and let's face it, to our BIM skills. I'm not saying that everybody should learn to program, which I strongly recommend.
You're saying.
Which I strongly recommend. But it's very clear to me that coders are becoming more and more common in the AEC sector. Jeremy, anything to add before we close?
Nope, fully agree.
Well, that's it for today. And thanks, Jeremy, for sharing your insights and stories. I hope you enjoyed spending this time with us, or at least not suffered too much.
Thank you.
And before we go, remember to join our community where you can dive deeper into technology and innovation in the AEC sector. BIMrras Insiders, don't miss out on connecting with top minds in the field. Best regards, and until the next episode of BIMrras podcast about BIM. I already said that even Chuck Norris doesn't dare to listen to.